Unless a seed is pushed into the dark, it will not grow. You see, Jesus knew that new things do not start their journey in the light, but in the dark. Whether a seed in the earth or a fetus in the womb, the dark grows what is new, what is not yet. Laying down these first roots of a living reality. And the roots, what are they in? This cacophonous world of interdependence and constant swirling changes. Wow. And yet, it's those changes that give life to the root, that allow it to do its journey. This process of germination is so important. You see, it takes a seed a little time to know which way is up, to know where the root sprout goes down and the green part goes up to meet the light. And today, we humans need to befriend the dark in new ways, not make it into an enemy, but to plant seeds. To plant seeds. Now, many don't know that they're in a dark place, that there even is a dark place, until it's pointed out to them. Think about these little quotes we have here. From Master Eckhart, God is not found in the soul by adding anything, but by a process of subtraction. And Rainier Maria Rilke, one of my favorite writers, I feel closer to what language cannot reach. Again, from Master Eckhart, the word is the hidden word. This word is the hidden word, and it comes in the darkness of the night. To enter this darkness, put away all voices and sounds, all images and likenesses, for no image has ever reached into the soul's foundation, where God herself, with her own being, is effective. And I love the quote from Starhawk, we can know the dark and dream it into a new image. Master Eckhart, the ground of the soul is dark. Now think about this. All this light we've got, where does it start? Where is it grounded in? It's grounded in the dark. T.S. Eliot said, I said to my soul, be still and let the dark come upon you, which shall be the darkness of God. Again, from Rilke, no matter how deeply I go down into myself, my God is dark and like a webbing made of hundreds of roots that drink in silence. You see, what price have we paid, as Matthew Fox said, for all this light? We've become afraid of the dark, afraid of no light, afraid of silence, afraid of imagelessness. We whore after more images, more light, more profits, more goods, more. And yet, wow. You see, many don't know this dark place, and they don't know it until it's pointed out. And I don't know if I should say regretfully or fortunately, there are these unique human beings who can see even in the dark. They're called comedians and tricksters and jokesters. They're the George Carlins and Chappelles and Johnny Carsons and crazy-ass people like Mitch Hepburn and Lenny Bruce. You see, when we try to look straight at the dark, we can't see it. It's this peripheral thing that's there all the time. There are these difficult truths that once owned grow a new dimension of what we see and how we see. And these little pieces come in the dark. They trick us out of our illusions of light and maybe set us on a course to think differently, act differently, live differently. It's not about having a plan, but it is about planting seeds. We've become afraid of the dark, and yet it is in the dark that I do my best growing, it seems. Wow. Where the paradox kisses its own ass. The dark and our blessed conundrums. We need to befriend this dark. We need to learn to plant new seeds. And that's not something that we always do intentionally. Rosa Parks was a seed in the dark. Think about that. I don't think she had any idea what she was doing. She was tired, man. But there's another aspect to the dark that's important. For the dark that we do not know, that dark that is unmanaged, becomes a shadow. And that shadow itself is full of unconscious aspects, forces that move in the world and take foot in the world and speak against what is true and real. So here we are, and I want us today to have some sense of befriending the dark, of learning to live with this aspect of our reality, and in that living with it, to grow something new, because, my friends, the old stuff is not going to get us through. It really is not. There are new ideas trying to get into the world. We saw the hippie movement tried to get it in the back door. The New Left tried to get it in the front door, which was slammed in our face at Kent State. The realities all around us, from environment to ecology to global change, they're trying to get these new ideas of interdependence and new paradigms. And there's all kinds of new spiritualities of wholeness that are trying to emerge, getting us to own the full breadth of ourselves. My friends, the dark, without it, we will die, for we will lose what we are rooted in. I just laid out my shotgun blast. I want to welcome my co-host, Marianne Rudis from Spokane Valley, Bob Hayes from Florida, Oviedo, I think, is that right? Something like that.
Oviedo.
There you go.
Near Orlando.
Yeah, near Orlando. And Bob, we'll start with you. The dark.
Well, you've laid out a lot of different things, and you label all those things the dark. And I think that's one of the things that we as humans have problems with, because as we've discussed in many different shows, we deal with the world around us symbolically. Many times we don't realize we're doing that. You know, when we meet a new girlfriend, we're symbolically projecting on her our feelings of motherhood, of our mother, of our experience with mothers and other women. So when we talk about the dark, there's a lot of different things that are coming together there. And I think one of the important things you mentioned is that it's the unknown. It's the idea that something is different that makes us uncomfortable. So we push it into what we label as the dark, because through our evolution, the nighttime was dangerous. That's when you had to be careful and stay in the village and all of this kind of stuff. The dark was something to be afraid of. So when we see something or begin to be exposed to something or have a thought about something that makes us uncomfortable, we tend to push it into that dark place because we don't have to deal with it. And I think what you're getting at in terms of planting seeds is being willing to examine those new ideas, new thoughts, as objectively as we can, without those feelings of danger, of pushing it away from us. And it's when we can open ourselves up to that then they are allowed to spring forth.
Yes. And, you know, the whole germination process, what we're talking about is how do we decide which end is up? You know, the seed, sometimes the sprout will go up and it's the wrong direction and has to turn around and go back down. It's really, and I've been sprouting seeds for a long time, so it's always amazed me how that works. Marianne, what are your first thoughts here on the dark? Befriending the dark, I should say.
Befriending the dark. Well, as you were talking, I kind of flashed on Plato's cave, you know, where you see these shadows on the wall and we think that that's the reality. And in truth, it's not reality. It's those things that we've put down into the dark too. So, and Bob, you were talking about, you know, it's like, those are things that we don't own. We don't want to own those kind of things. And so, you know, to be afraid of the dark is something that we have to grow out of, because if we can understand that in the dark, love still exists, then we can find our way through that. It's when we're in the dark and we're full of fear, instead of seeing that as a time of germination to use your analogy, Red Hawk, it's a time of germination and it's a time for growth, then we can bring love into that, and that will shine a light, and that will help us grow and become something even more. And I think when we look at the comedians and we look at using humor to bring a light into those dark places, comedians talk about the things that resonate with us are truth. Because when they say something and they can make you see that in a Bob, you have talked about this before, kind of that back door. We have to trick people into seeing things in the light. And humor has the ability to be able to trick us because it touches a truth within us and makes us look at things in new ways. So I think you're right, the dark is part of it. And if we can remember that in those dark places, love can still exist and we don't have to be afraid, then that will help us be able to live a better life.
And you bring out something important, and that's that you look at an apple tree when it's in blossom, or, cherry blossoms for me, just amazing. But what we miss is that all of that is grounded in the dark. All the root structure, all of it. And what we're really asking is, hey, don't forget this piece. This is where we're rooted. We can't cure a disease in the tree by treating up here. We have to treat the roots. And we're trying to do that. And part of what comedians are teaching us to do is to learn to see in the dark. It's not about it doesn't mean the fear goes away. It just means you start feeling around in there and you start seeing stuff. And it's important to see, and I love this, again, Matthew Fox, all mystery is about the dark. All darkness is about mystery. Here's the underbelly of the Enlightenment. It tells us that we have this pernicious notion that we are to conquer mystery. It's mystery itself, just as we were to conquer the land and the animals and our feelings. You see, this is the underbelly of it. It tries to get us to make everything conscious, when the fact is everything ain't going to be conscious. We need to somehow be able to swim in the unconscious morass of our own being and somehow stimulate ourselves that little flits and pieces of our unconscious life might become conscious, and we might learn to see and use them as guideposts for ourselves to walk around in that mystery land that is below the level of our awareness. It's a dark place there. Go ahead, Bob.
Let me throw another perspective in here. There are aspects of the dark that are real dark. And I like the optimism that Marianne talks about, shining the light in the dark. But there are aspects that should be in the dark, that should stay in the dark. And this is where we have to engage our semipermeability. We have to be able to distinguish those aspects of the dark that we need. I'll extend the metaphor a little bit. There's certain types of fertilizer that you put on those seeds and it helps them germinate. But if you put the wrong type of fertilizer, or you put too much fertilizer, it's not going to grow properly.
You'll burn it.
So this is where as conscious beings, we have to be able to distinguish what are those aspects of the dark that we can bring the light to, and what are those aspects that need to be pushed down further into the dark?
Well, I think that's a beautiful question, Bob. What is it that we are growing, right? And what we are going to feed those dark things, and what's going to grow from them. So how do we discern what to feed and what not to feed? And I think one of the things, though, we tend to think of the dark as bad and the light as good. And I think that's where we get mixed up. And your quote from Matthew Fox, was that it?
Mm-hmm.
So about conquering the dark. It's not something that we need to conquer. It's a place that we need to enter. And then we need to make sure that we feed the things that we want to grow and don't feed the things that we don't want to grow, right? Because there are some ugly things, some ugly fears that we're seeing out there in the world that are manifesting that are very, very ugly.
And if one weed gets into the garden, what did Jesus say? It takes over the whole thing. And here's the piece that I think that y'all are bringing into light that's really good. And that's that we are growing something new, and we don't know what new things to grow. And part of what we're growing is a new awareness of what is healthy and whole. We did not have that. We didn't see things within context. We saw them as isolated and a content. Now we can't look at the content without seeing the context and seeing all the things that content is leaning on and all the things that are leaning on that content, whether it's a mosquito or a bacterium or whatever. And this whole process of growing a new understanding of what is healthy and whole has to help us know what seeds to germinate. We have allowed some seeds to germinate in this country, and I don't want to go too far because they get into next week's podcast, but we've allowed some seeds to germinate that are growing some pretty crazy shit. I won't even say shit because shit will make the garden grow, as Bob has said, but it's toxic waste. It makes nothing grow. It literally undoes everything it touches. So the dark does have this aspect to it, but it's important for us to see that the yin and yang is not all light. It is part dark. That every tree that we see blossoming and that we go, ooh, that is so beautiful, has a root structure that is unbelievable. And I've used the example of the rye plant because it's so magnificent to me. A square inch of soil under a rye plant, if you took the roots and all the root hairs and lined them up, they'd go 6,000 miles. That's a cubic inch, of soil. Think about that. That's some extravagance, man. And that's in the dark. That's happening in the dark all the time. You look at a forest, oh my gosh, in the dark, man.
That is a perfect example of how the dark fuels the light, right? It's all of that root system is fueling that whole plant, right? Or the tree that you brought up.
Let's get back to my favorite term, which is balance. And it's no coincidence that in Taoism, the symbol of yin and yang, the dark side has the light at its center, and the light side has the dark at its center. And that's the way the whole thing works. We have to constantly balance those two aspects to keep things moving.
And Zoroastrianism was tried to do that. It's just when it got picked up by other religions that saw the dark as evil, and it kind of recast the whole thing. But the whole thing with Zoroastrianism is like, hey, there's these two forces, and they're in the universe. If everything was light, you'd be snowblind. There has to be dark in order for a star to twinkle, and this. I think the underbelly of the Enlightenment and rationality and Western culture is to try to explain the mystery in such a way that it's not a mystery anymore. Science is quickly finding that every time they explain one layer of it, they just go to 10 more new layers of the mystery, and it's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so true is when we try to say that we have it all figured out. I saw an interesting quote the other day, and somebody had said, oh, by the age of 25, if you don't have your life figured out, then you're in trouble. And it's just like, wait a minute, that is so wrong, because I don't care how old you are. If you think you have life figured out, you're deluding yourself, because it is a continual growth. And the light and dark, that provides depth. And that's where we can go deep, at the deep end, right? We have that light and dark, those two forces.
Yeah.
one of the big mistakes of the progression of life kind of happens in the early 20s or around 25, when you think you know it all. And then suddenly you're 30 and you don't know it near as well as you thought. And then suddenly you're 40 and you know even less than you thought you knew. And that's the way it goes, But just because you think you know it, maybe that's a warning. Maybe that should be taken as a warning.
And this is something, a piece that, most people have what I call a provisional reality. And they know things within those provisions because they can control them and manage them. The problem is later in life, things start coming in, anomalies that don't fit your provisional universe, and all of a sudden the provisional frame starts breaking down. And it can cause depression. It can cause you to say, oh, I just don't love my wife anymore. And so you get rid of your wife and you buy a new copy and you reproject your next life. But again, what you all are talking about is, by the time you're 25, you're just starting to get lost in your own projections.
Right. Well, and this brings up the idea that when we look around, animals, when they live in their environments and they look around their environment, they think that's all there is, and they respond to those environments. And we as human beings think that we know, from our own personal experience, we think we know about all life. We know everything. And yet we are in the same position. We only know what we know. And I think wisdom comes in those later years when you start to understand, I know that I don't know. And I know that there is so much more out there that I am not privy to. And being open to always learning and growing, I think that is the key to a better world. Yeah. We all need to keep growing.
And I want to bring us back a little bit to the side that because this, I love this quote, God is super essential darkness. Think about that. Super essential darkness. All light grows from the dark. To make contact with the darkness is to make contact with the deepest side of the Godhead. Love God as God is a not God, a not mind, a not person, a not image, counsels Master Eckhart. In other words, out there beyond right and wrong, out there beyond all the images, there is a place we can meet where we're all joined together as one, where Bob's favorite word comes into play, balance, and it is one homeostatic reality where all the tensions are equal in such a way that the whole thing works. Welcome to planet Earth, a whole planet rooted in the dark. We're not going to get rid of it. The mystery grows. Now, I think if we can start seeing the dark in the sense of the Enlightenment, and I mean that as a historical thing, as a motivator to go deeper into the mystery. I think that's, we just, in some swamp, we just found the first bacterium that you can see with the naked eye. Now, that doesn't mean a whole lot to you, but I've read a lot of chemistry, a lot of biochemistry. That's exciting. I want to see it through a microscope. The mystery is unfolding. We're not going to figure it out. That is the provisional reality. That is the lie that we can tell ourselves, that can make ourselves feel more comfortable. But I want us to see darkness as the super essential God. Whatever the movement is, and if you go to the podcast on God, you see I don't think God is a noun, but a verb. It's a movement whose presence we can experience when we move with that movement, in accord with it. And that movement has its basis, its basic rootedness in the dark. And so we ourselves must befriend the dark. And that doesn't mean I'm going to stop being afraid of the dark, but it does mean I'm going to start seeing that that's where I do some of my best growing of new ideas, new ways of being, new everything. And we also need to see that those emergent realities that are growing in the dark, and Bob, you helped me see this, it's about chaos. You know, the soil is chaotic. There's all these things happening. Chemicals are moving every freaking direction, and the worms can defecate 6 times their weight every day. I mean, it's an amazing thing, just making dirt, making the dark. And yet, there in that place, the basic, most essential exchanges of energy, chemistry, biology take place that give rise to everything, including us. And if you don't believe that, next time you sit down to a plate of broccoli, go, that sucker died, so I might live. It's what we're a part of. It's all rooted. And so, to me, befriend the dark. Somehow we have to bring this idea that the dark is not our enemy, that it's not something to figure out, but it's one more part of the dance. They're just sitting there nodding. We're in the dark. We're befriending our silence.
And don't be afraid of the silence either, because silence is it is a place where you process.
Yeah.
But I think, one of the things that, when you think of being afraid of the dark, I think we're afraid of the unknown, and we associate the dark with what we can't see, that we don't know, and that we're going to be kind of hit with something. But I think that if we can discover that in that dark we can find ourselves, or we can find God, or we can find whatever it is that that you want to call it, your higher self. And I think there is when, once we find that, and we can find love there. And it's kind of that yin and yang thing again. And if we find that center place, then we don't have to be afraid. And we can't, and I think once we let go of the fear of what we might find in that unknown, then I think then we can move forward with brand new, something new.
Amen. I'm going to let that be your final comments, because we're running at the end here. Bob, your final comments?
Well, I use the term balance all the time. I'm going to throw a little monkey wrench into that, because the only way processes work is through imbalance. Electricity flows from negative to positive. Minerals, vitamins, whatever, flow from outside of the cell into the cell because of the imbalance, the sodium and potassium balance within cells. So there's another order of balance beyond what we normally think of as balance, and that's the balance between balance and imbalance. And we can probably take that to infinity. But it's another one of those things that we try not to think about. We push into the darkness. But the more we can think about those things, the more we can expand our way of looking at things, the more likely we're going to hit some truths, as Marianne says.
And the whole concept of swirling change, everything is not in balance, but it is seeking it. And, if you listen to some of our early podcasts, the universe probably came about because the perfect symmetry was upset at some point. And the universe is trying to get back to that. But, the whole concept of the dark, it's really important. It's really important because we're at a crossroads. 4th of July is coming up, and on the 5th, we're going to go to America. Who are we? I have to say my journey has been a trip. I've gotten to work with Congress people. I've gotten to work with judges. I've gotten to work with all kinds of people, the local and the national level. My dad was Army Chief of Staff, so we got to go to all the White House thingies and, crazy times. America, something's happened to us, and yet there's still something there that I so believe in, and I can't stop being a bloody patriot. Bloody patriot. See, that's what's going to come to. I hate to say that. I'm a peace freak. But people are arming themselves, and the world is getting weird, man. So who are we? How do we? What are the choices that are laying before us? Is the union splitting up? We're going to go there, all the way there, next week when we go to America. God's peace and many blessings.